Welcome to The Shift Show with Adriana Bucci. Join me every week to learn all about narcissistic abuse recovery, healing from physical and emotional pain after the abuse, and everything else to do with toxic people and how they affect your physical, emotional, and mental health. And no, you are not the crazy one. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Let's get right to it. Welcome to episode 4 of The Shift Show. Today, I'm going to talk about how to heal from narcissistic abuse. Now, I don't want to make any false promises that you listen to this episode and then you're magically healed. It totally does not work that way. This is just going to be some suggestions on what inner work you can do in order to start your healing journey. A couple things that I will mention about healing. Number 1, it can be a constant thing that you do. It's one of those things where you get the bulk of it done and then triggers will continue to happen throughout your life and the healing continues. It's not one of those things where you just, you do a couple of coaching sessions or you go to therapy for a bit and then you're healed. It's about building a toolbox within you so that you can take on whatever life throws at you in the future. Healing also requires you to step out of your comfort zone. The important thing to understand about your comfort zone is that you don't know how it feels to step outside of it. So you don't know that things are going to be better once you've made yourself a little bit uncomfortable. And when you really think about it, how comfortable are you right now not having done any of the healing work? I'm willing to bet it's not very comfortable. For me, I was in chronic pain for years. That was very uncomfortable. So as somebody who has been through it, I will say that it is more comfortable to do the uncomfortable thing than to remain exactly the way you are without bothering doing any of the work because you just write it off and decide it's too much work, it's too uncomfortable, it sucks, I don't want to do it. It wasn't my idea of what healing was. This is no fun. You can't have that kind of attitude if you're serious about healing. It's okay to be understanding that, yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it's hard work. But you can't completely write it off if healing is truly what you want to do. For some people, and this might come off a little, controversial would be the right word to use. Some people need to reach a higher level of discomfort with their current situation before they start healing. So it kind of is one of those things where you have to ask yourself, do I need to suffer more before I start to do this work? Sometimes you do. Really. Sometimes you really do have to suffer more before you realize that you need to do something different. Sometimes when you ask yourself that question, you realize, wait a minute, what am I doing? No, I don't need to suffer anymore. I'm done with suffering, and I'll take the suffering of healing work over what I'm going through right now because I'm ready for it. So it's totally up to you if you are ready for it or not. And this goes for anyone who is listening to this for a loved one who is suffering from their past traumas. It is up to that person to decide whether or not they are done with suffering and whether or not they're willing to take on a new form of discomfort in order to live their best life. There's a lot of fear of the unknown. When you are a trauma survivor and you have no idea what it's like to live whatever a normal life is, it's scary. And it's completely normal to be terrified of doing the work because you don't know what it's going to be like on the other side of healing. And I can't tell you what your life is going to be like on the other side of healing because I'm not you. What I can tell you from my experience is that I would take the other side of healing any day over where I was before I started the healing work. So it is worth it. It looks different for everybody. And it's uncomfortable, but again, it's so worth it. So now that I've overwhelmed you with all this information, let us get started with some steps that you can take to begin healing from narcissistic abuse. The first step is to acknowledge, understand, and know that there is nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. If you suffered from narcissistic abuse as a child, the way that you are behaving as an adult is a normal reaction to that trauma. And that's even if the narcissist does not want you to think that. And this also goes for anybody who has been in an adult relationship with a narcissist. The way you are reacting to that abuse is normal. It does not make any sense that somebody can get emotionally and mentally abused by a narcissist and have no reaction to it. And this is the thing with narcissists. When you react to their abuse, they point the finger at you and they call you the abusive person just for simply reacting. And I'm here to tell you that reacting is completely normal. If you didn't react and you were totally okay with it, then something would probably be wrong with you. But the fact that you are reacting to it and you're in shock and you're upset, that's completely normal. And don't even for 1 second believe the narcissist or any enablers that you're overreacting. Oh, but it's family. Oh, but this. Oh, but that. Oh, but nothing. You are allowed to be reacting to something terrible that happened to you. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise or tell you that it's not normal. So just understand that there's literally nothing wrong with you. You're also not broken. There's nothing that needs to be fixed. What you need is the sense of safety to feel your feelings, which you likely never had the opportunity to know what that's even like if you survived narcissistic abuse, especially if it was from your childhood and it's a childhood trauma situation that you're going through. And I will say that if you are noticing a pattern of narcissistic relationships in your adulthood, whether that's romantically, whether that's in a job, and you keep getting different jobs and you find all sorts of narcissistic people in your work environment after a very short honeymoon period at the job, or even with your friendships and you're noticing you have a lot of friends who have narcissistic traits, this is very common for anybody who was raised by a narcissistic caregiver, because you don't know anything different from that. So essentially, the first step is to kind of give yourself a break and be kind with yourself. And if you don't know how to do that, that's okay, but just know that it's possible for you to be kind to yourself, and just to at least understand that there's nothing wrong with you. And you're already taking a great step by even thinking about doing the healing work. So even if you haven't done any work yet, if you're still listening to this podcast episode because this interests you and this is something that you want to do for yourself, even though you haven't technically done anything, you're already doing something. So that is awesome. And that's also another indication that there's nothing wrong with you. And also understanding that it's just a matter of unlearning the patterns and behaviors that you grew up with. There's nothing to fix. You're not broken. Step number 2 is to get really honest with yourself. Being honest with yourself heals your nervous system. Having childhood trauma affects your nervous system. Having some sort of trauma affects your nervous system. And if you're not honest with yourself, if you're not looking at that trauma, if you're not acknowledging the fact that you even had trauma, your nervous system's going to be out of whack. What does that look like? That looks like anxiety. That looks like chronic pain. That looks like having mystery symptoms. That looks like just knowing that there's something wrong and just putting it to the side because you just don't want to deal with it because it's too much right now. If that's too much right now, you have to be honest with yourself about where you're at right now. Is where you're at in the level of discomfort too much for you? Because if it is, then you do need to take that uncomfortable step and be honest with yourself and look at that trauma, even if it is uncomfortable. It's so easy to know that something bad happened to you, to know that you went through some sort of trauma, and to just put that in the back of your mind and not look at it. That is the easy way. And I'm not going to say it's the easy way out, because you're not getting out of anything by doing that. That's just the easy way to deal with it in the moment. But this does not help you. So it's important to be honest with yourself before more shit hits the fan. Because as you accumulate your trauma and you repress it and you hold on to it and you hang on to those emotions, guess what happens to all of that stuff you're repressing? Nothing. And only more and more gets added to it, and that just adds to your discomfort. And then just the idea of doing something different is even more uncomfortable until you do it. So step number 3 would be to acknowledge that you have repressed emotions. So I will go through how you know if you have repressed emotions and how they got repressed to begin with. So for me, I thought that I just didn't have any emotions at all, and I was really proud of this when I first found out about this whole repressed emotions thing. I thought it was just such a ludicrous idea that the reason for my suffering was because I had repressed emotions, until I started thinking about it. And if you heard my first episode, you know that I had no other choice than to look into this whole mind-body connection, because I was in a lot of physical chronic pain for 4 years. So there was literally nothing else I could have done. Otherwise, I would have just laughed at this and continued with my life and continued suffering and been okay with that until it got worse. So I was definitely at that point where I couldn't suffer anymore. There was no other option for me but to look into doing this work. And this is why I'm here now, sharing this with as many people who want to listen. So if you were raised in a narcissistic household with parents or caregivers with narcissistic tendencies, chances are your emotions as a child were an inconvenience to your parent. Maybe your parent got upset with you when you were a 2-year-old having an emotional reaction. And in your 2-year-old brain, seeing either the look of scorn on your parent's face or being yelled at or however it is that your parent or caregiver conveyed to you that the way you're reacting emotionally was unacceptable, the way you interpret that as a child is that, this emotion is dangerous. Because if I have this emotion, my parent is not going to love me anymore. And I know to an adult brain, this sounds a little extreme, because it does. But to a child's brain, to the child's developing brain, this makes complete, perfect sense. And you don't just magically turn 18 years old after enduring a pattern of this, of having to walk on eggshells around a caregiver or parent, and your brain just magically heals itself, and then you realize, oh, this was all a trauma response and I'm all good now. That is not how it works. Just because you reach adulthood, it doesn't mean that your brain is automatically interpreting the rest of your life as an adult brain would without that trauma response. No, you have to look at that trauma. So, for example, back to my example of the 2-year-old, we'll talk about the emotion of anger. If a 2-year-old was angry about, I'm going to be honest, I'm just going to make up a random example because I really don't know what 2-year-olds get angry about in general, but let's say they did not get ice cream with their dinner or whatever, and they're angry about it. And the parent gets angry at the child for being angry. The child represses the anger and learns that they're not allowed to be angry ever. And anytime that they do feel like they're getting angry about something, they just repress it. And they keep repressing it. This becomes people-pleasing behaviors in the future. This becomes personality traits like walking on eggshells, being a perfectionist, things like that. These seemingly small childhood experiences with a reaction from a parent that is negative is what causes these types of personality traits and is what causes people to repress their emotions. This could also happen in a school setting. Like if a kid gets in trouble for whatever, like I don't know what kids get in trouble for, just like 2-year-olds, but whatever a kid would get in trouble for at school, and a teacher gets mad at the kid and yells at them, that kid is going to take that emotion and internalize it and repress it. And it's not going to magically get unrepressed when the kid turns 18. So imagine if you were in a toxic family environment growing up, how many opportunities there were for you to repress those emotions. And I'm willing to bet there were tons of opportunities for that. And there's many, many examples in your life of when you did repress emotions and you're just not aware of it. And you might be looking at it now as in, well, I don't have emotions because I just don't feel them. Well, of course, because they're repressed and you have no idea that they're there. So you have to acknowledge that you even have repressed emotions, or that there is a possibility that you have repressed emotions. It's very common to have very limited memories of your childhood when you've been through that sort of trauma. And that is completely okay and completely normal, which brings me back to my first point that there's nothing wrong with you. You had a normal reaction to the trauma. So just acknowledging that, yeah, maybe there are some repressed emotions, and by releasing these emotions, I might be able to heal. And we'll get into that coming up. So step number 4 would be to embrace and release those emotions. And this is where things can get very tricky, because this is not something that society has ever taught us, that it's even okay to have emotions. The way society is run is very emotionless. Like, you go to work, you leave everything at the door, you come to work, you do whatever you have to do, you make everybody at work happy, and that's just how society runs, and whatever. So this can be very complicated for people and very tricky to even wrap your head around how this would even work. So I'm just going to say that it's very helpful to work with somebody when this is something that you're planning on doing, to release those emotions. So you could work with a therapist, you could work with a coach. This is why I became a coach, because this is such a tricky part of the healing, and it's so easy to get wrapped up in the actual trauma rather than the emotion. And the actual trauma itself, it is what it is, but the emotion behind the trauma is what is going to lead you into your healing. The emotion behind the trauma is the most important thing. So even if you don't remember every single detail of the trauma, that is perfect. That's completely fine. You can just have the vague idea of the trauma, of what happened. So if it's you were raised by a narcissist, that's fine. That's very vague, because there's so many little things that happen when you are raised by a narcissist that you might not remember everything, and that is completely fine. It's just the emotions behind that. So if you don't know what the emotions are, that's okay too. You can think about what you assume the emotion would be. So is there a level of fear? Of course there's a level of fear, because if you're repressing your emotions, you're afraid to express them. So you can talk about the fear. You can start journaling about the fear. Journaling is such a great way to release your emotions, and I advise all of my clients to journal because it's the most therapeutic thing you can possibly do. And my style of journaling is you literally grab a piece of paper, you write on it for 20 minutes, uncensored, and then you rip it up after. And you can talk about anything. You can talk about a past childhood experience, you can talk about a current adult stress, you can talk about personality traits. It doesn't matter, and chances are you're going to go way off topic. So you could be talking about how I don't know, you had a cat when you were 3 years old and the cat died and that traumatized you, and then all of a sudden you realize you're talking about unicorns. You can go in any direction when you do your journaling, and try not to judge yourself. Whatever direction you end up going in is completely fine. If you don't even know what you're going to write about, that's okay too. Just get a pen, get a piece of paper, and just put the pen on the paper. If you want to write a swear word over and over and over for 20 minutes, that's perfectly fine too. You're still releasing some sort of emotion. But the important thing is you don't have to write about the trauma. You don't have to think about the trauma. What's important is acknowledging the emotion behind that trauma. So you don't have to retell your story. You don't have to do any of that. I do it because I think it's going to help people, and I'm at that point where I'm ready to do it. This doesn't mean that I needed to do this to heal. I dealt with the emotions behind whatever stories that I do share. So again, just to reiterate, focus on the emotion. And it's okay if you don't know what the emotion is. Just pick one and just write about it and see where that takes you. And if you do this every day, you're going to feel better. It's going to empower you. You're going to feel a sense of calm. One of my clients who did this for a week said that they experienced a very strange sense of calm after doing it. Even though it was super uncomfortable, they had this weird sense of calmness. And it's weird because you're not used to it. And that is perfect. And just acknowledging that, okay, this is different. Wow, I actually have some sense of calmness in my mind-body system, and that's great. And just being okay with that and just continuing to do it and not giving up on yourself. And the fifth tip that I'm going to share is to get rid of this attitude of be strong, stay positive, and love and light. Why do I say that? Because being strong is what got you here. Having to put on this face of being a strong person because you've been through a lot is not going to help you. It is okay to feel your emotions, and being strong only reiterates repressing those emotions. Staying positive is the same thing. If you focus only on the positive and you have not processed any of the negative emotions that you've had, that's a problem. And those repressed negative emotions are going to stay repressed. And I'm going to also mention that you can also repress positive emotions. For me, excitement was a positive emotion that I repressed. Why did I do this? Because anytime I would get excited about something as a child, something or someone would burst my bubble of excitement. So, for example, if I was excited about my birthday party, it would turn into, oh, if you don't shut up, we're canceling your birthday party. So I would stop being excited about it because I thought that my birthday party would be taken away from me. So as an adult, I continued to repress any happy emotions. And it was because of a fear that if I got too excited about something, it wouldn't happen or it would get taken away from me. So it's important to understand that staying positive when you've been repressing any variety of emotion, whether negative, positive, neutral, whatever, is not going to help you. It's not going to help you at all. And it's okay for you to say that this sucks. This is terrible. It's okay for you to say that. And you're allowed, you can give yourself the permission to allow the experience of whatever you went through to suck and to process that and honor how you feel about it. And then once you have felt that emotion, it starts to go away. So something that I forgot to mention while I was talking about how to start journaling and feeling your emotions is that as you feel the emotion, you can feel fear, for example, building up inside you as you're writing about it. And that's perfect. It's super easy to take that fear and shove it back down because it's making you uncomfortable. But it's important to understand that by feeling the fear goes away. So I would challenge you to just try it and to understand that nothing bad is going to happen to you by feeling that fear or whatever the emotion is. Because what's programmed into us as young kids is that it's dangerous to feel these emotions. And your brain literally interprets that as, I'm going to die. I'm going to literally pass away if I show this emotion, if I feel this emotion. And that is what drives you to repress them so much. And that's why doing this work is so difficult. And that's why just understanding that and being kind to yourself and taking it at a pace that's comfortable to yourself is what's going to help you. So yeah, just understanding that the whole stay strong, be positive, love and light, these are all great things, but you have to be able to make room for the positivity, for the love and light and all that by dealing with the negativity, with the darkness and everything that is repressed, whether it's good, bad, or neutral, because that is the only way that you'll be able to create space for all this great stuff. You can't just bypass it. You can't just repeat a mantra over and over and pretend that you're positive and decide that you're healed. Like, it does not work that way. It really takes sticking your hands into the mud of your experience, of your inner trauma, of your brain, of your inner child, all that kind of stuff. And it's, again, not easy work to do. But once you start doing it, you learn so much about yourself and you get empowered to continue your healing journey. And obviously, this is a very vague kind of list on how to heal, because at the end of the day, healing starts with you. Doing the inner work starts with you. You have to be willing to do this work. You have to be at a point in your life where you're so uncomfortable with how things are that you're willing to make yourself a little bit more uncomfortable in order to be comfortable, because that's just how it works. So I hope that this has been helpful. I will add some resources to the podcast description notes. I do have a book that I created on how to get started on doing the emotional work. It's an introduction and a step-by-step guide on everything that I just described, essentially. It walks you through in a practical way on how to start doing this emotional work in a way that's not intimidating and in a way that is safe and not too rushed, because when you do it too quickly, you are at risk of re-traumatizing yourself, and that's never fun. I did that to myself multiple times when I did the work myself, which is what motivated me to even write that book to begin with. So that is linked in the podcast description. I also do offer coaching services where I help guide people through this exact thing. This is what I guide my clients to, and this is what causes my clients to have their breakthroughs, to have their aha moments, to realize that, wow, there is more to life than what I went through, and I am capable of actually healing, and I can do this, and it's okay to have assistance doing this. That's why we're here. That's why this is what is the great part about humanity, that we can all help each other to heal. And that's exactly why I decided to do what I'm doing, because I kind of did it on my own for the most part. I didn't start working with a coach until I was like pretty much at the end of my healing journey, and I still work with a coach to this day. I work with 2 coaches right now, actually, because it's so important to have that kind of support and to have a system of people supporting you. But I do recognize that not everyone can have a coach. It's not feasible financially for everybody. So that is why I created a very affordable book, and that's why I do offer all this free content on my Instagram account, on my YouTube channel, on my Facebook page. So if you're interested in following any of those, the handle is Let's Get Your Shift Together. I will link that as well in the description of this, and I will end this here. So if you have any questions at all about the healing journey, I will have future episodes that go into further details on more of this healing stuff. But if there's anything particularly pressing or specific, feel free to shoot me an email at letsgetyourshifttogether@gmail.com. And for anyone who has emailed me podcast episode suggestions, don't worry, they are coming. I do have a bit of a lineup of things that I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to incorporate a lot of those questions into future episodes. So don't worry, the episode suggestions that anyone has made are coming, I promise you. Just give it a couple of weeks or so, and your questions will all be answered. All right, so we will see you next Wednesday. I hope this episode has been helpful. Bye.